Good day, everyone. So for today, we have the continuation of my first discussion. So right now, we have the another classification of the skeletal system. So we have the two major parts of the skeletal system. We have the axial skeleton and then the appendicular skeleton. However, in other books, usually meron pang tatlo, yung pang tatlo which is the splanchnic skeleton. But then we will not just discuss that one. So we will just focus dito sa dalawa. We have the axial and then the appendicular. So right now, for my discussion today, nakafocus lang ako doon sa skull ng animals natin. So let's discuss one by one yung mga different parts in terms of the cranial parts and then doon sa facial parts ng skull ng animals natin. Okay, so we have here the bones of the axial skeleton. So it includes the bones on or attached to the midline of the body and comprise the skull, the vertebral column, the sternum, and then the ribs. So as what I have said, we will just focus dito muna sa skull. So we will have the cranial part and then the facial part. But then later on, hindi lahat ng mga to will be discussed. So may mga some important lang na nilagay ko, yun yung i-discuss ko for today. Okay, so let's start with the skull as the overview. So number one dyan is protection. No? It protects the brain. So yung skull, it usually serves as a protective casing na nagsusurround and nagsisafeguard doon sa brain ng animals natin. And we all know that of course the brain that is one of the most vital organs in the body. So another one, it supports many of the sense organs. So it usually provides support for various sense organs, like for example, the eyes, the ears, the nose. Okay? So lahat ng mga to, itong mga sense organs na to, it ensures yung skull, it ensures it that they are well positioned and they are well protected. No? And then it forms passages. So merong mga forming passages. So it usually play a vital role itong skull natin for the entry to the digestive and respiratory system. Like for example, the skull, so it usually houses yung mouth and yung mga nasal passages which are very integral to both yung ingestion and pag-breathe no ng animals natin. So another one, the skull consists of the cranial part and then the facial part. So ito na yung i-discuss ko right now. So we have the cranial part which is the brain case and then the facial part. So it usually protects no it yung brain case kasi or the cranial part, it usually surrounds and protects yung brain. While yung facial part, that is usually the bones that make up the face of the animals. Okay? And the term cranium is sometimes used to denote the entire skull. Okay? So other word other word of the entire skull, that is basically the cranium. But then it specifically denotes yung brain case excluding the facial bone. So most of the observable species differences. So differences in the appearance of the head of the animal are often attributed to the variations in the facial part of the skull. So, etong mga differences na to, it usually include yung shape ng skull, yung size ng skull, yung arrangement ng teeth nila, and then if there is a presence of horns or if they are pulled or other distinctive features. So like for example, eto, so there are different, no? So yung skull ng animals natin could differ from one another based on their appearances. So like for example, ito yung horse. Ito yung cattle. This is for the cat, the dog, the swine, and then we have the chicken. Okay, so let's start. So For this part, let's have, as what I've said kanina, yung skull that is basically being divided into two. We have the cranial part, which is under the brain case or the cranium. So we have the occipital, the frontal, the parietal, the temporal, the ethmoid, and then the sphenoid bones. So we have here the occipital bone. So it's starting the cranial part of the bone. We have the occipital bone. This is usually the caudal view of the skull. So ito yung pinaka yung occipital bone. So like for other bones, so of course it is usually important also for protection and structure of the body. So saan natin nakikita? As what I have said, it is caudal. So it usually situated at the back, no? At the back and base of the skull. Okay? So doon sa posterior part, no? So posterior part of the skull. So one of the primary functions, of course, of the occipital bone is usually to protect the brain from any na external trauma. Okay? Kasi yung bony structure nito, it usually acts as a shield providing a barrier para ma-safeguard yung brain from any injuries that could result from any head impacts or kumbaga pag mabagok yung mga animals natin. Okay? So for this one also is for the occipital bone is for the attachment for the muscle. So it usually serves as an attachment site for several muscles natin. And ano tong mga muscles na to, it's usually, ito yung mga muscles that are very responsible for moving the head, okay? Such as those na yung mga muscles that are being used for grazing, pag inaangat ng animal yung head niya or pag tineturn niya, nirorotate niya yung head niya, those are the muscles that usually being attached to the occipital bones, no? And then also one function of the occipital bone is for support mechanism through the sensory function. So in the occipital region of the skull, there are usually structures which are what we call as the occipital condyles. I will show you later on kung saan yung occipital condyles. They are usually rounded na projections that usually articulate with the atlas. Okay? Ano yung atlas? That is the first cervical vertebrae. So etong articulation na to, it usually allows para makapag-nod. Para makapag-nod or makapag-flexion yung head ng animals natin. Okay? So that is one of the most important functions of the occipital bones. However, in terms of variations, usually, ang occipital bone, it usually varies depending on the species. Like for example, the cattle, the sheep, the goats, meron silang single na compact na occipital bone. However, sa mga pigs natin, if you could observe, yung occipital bone nila, meron silang relatively na flat na occipital region. Okay? So, aside from that one, under the occipital bone, meron tayong large opening, no? Which is what we call as the foramen magnum. Si foramen magnum, large opening ito na nagko-connect doon sa spinal cord to the brain. So, etong opening na to, this is very essential for the passage of the spinal cord and yung pag-flow ng cerebrospinal fluid, which is very crucial para makapag-function properly yung central nervous system natin. So ano ba yung usually na spinal cord as you all know? So it carries yung mga sensory and motor information between the brain and then the rest of the body. So in farm animals, etong mga information na to, these are very essential sa pag-control ng voluntary at saka yung involuntary movements as well as yung transmission ng sensory input. No? So one of the main functions actually ng foramen magnum, that is protection. Since it usually connects for the spinal cord, it protects yung spinal cord natin. Okay? So parang nagsaserve ito yung bony structure ng occipital bone. It usually forms a protective barrier around the foramen magnum para ma-shield niya, ma-protect niya yung delicate na spinal cord from any potential na injuries, like for example pag na-compress yung katawan ng animal or pag merong trauma. So that is one of the main functions of the foramen magnum. So as what I've said kanina, articulation with atlas. So in farm animals natin, yung occipital, yung foramen magnum, it usually articulates with the first cervical vertebra, okay, which is the atlas. So as what I've said, yung articulation na to, it usually allows para merong flexion doon sa head. Okay? Para ano ba yung purpose kung bakit merong flexion ng head or pag nagnonod yung animals natin, that is usually being used for grazing purposes. Okay? Yung grazing, pag linilift nila yung head nila para ma-explore yung environment, lineflection nila. So that is one of the functions of the foramen magnum. Now we have here another one, important feature ng occipital bone. We have the occipital condyles, no? Ito, as what I've said, rounded projections ito or bony structures that are usually located on either side of the foramen magnum. So itong mga to, these are the occipital condyles. So ano ba yung purpose ng occipital condyles? Ganun din, like for the foramen magnum, it's usually for um, yung articulation ng atlas, which is the first na cervical vertebra. And then another one is for protection din ng spinal cord, since it is usually connected dito na yung spinal cord. Yung mga occipital condyles natin, it usually contribute para magkaroon ng protective barrier that usually surrounds the foramen magnum. So parang they help na maprotektaran yung spinal cord from any potential injuries that usually could occur at the base of the skull. Okay, so that is for the occipital bone. And then meron din tayong tinatawag na jugular process. Ito naman, we have the jugular process or what we call as the jugular notch or jugular foramen. Okay? So this is also another bony structure or bony feature of the occipital bone. Typically located doon sa either side ng foramen magnum or yung mismong occipital condyles natin. Okay? So ano yung function ng mga to ng jugular process, which is ang unang pinaka-function nito is yung jugular process, parang nandoon si jugular foramen. Okay? Parang hina-house niya yung jugular foramen, which is usually a canal or opening through which the internal jugular vein passes. Okay? So etong mga jugular veins na to, these are usually major blood vessels that carry the oxygenated blood from the head, from the neck, and then brain back to the heart. No? And then in terms of the cranial nerves natin, in addition to the internal jugular vein, usually etong jugular foramen, it usually also provides passage, no, for several cranial nerves. So including si glossopharyngeal nerve, si vagus nerve, at saka si accessory nerve. And then another function is for the yung internal jugular vein kasi, kinokollect niya yung mga blood from various regions of the head and then the neck, including the brain. So it usually plays now a crucial role, as what I've said kanina. It carries the oxygenated blood away from these areas and then it will return into the heart for oxygenation. So parang daanan din to, it serves as a canal for the blood vessels, no, for the jugular veins natin. Okay? And then last one, we have the external occipital protuberance, or also known as the external occipital crest or inion. Inion as in I-N-I-O-N, inion. Okay, like for example, doon sa spelling lang ng onion, just change the O into I, so that is inion. So another na distinct na anatomical feature also that is located on the occipital bone at the back of the skull in farm animals natin. So ano ba yung usual na function ng external occipital protuberance? It usually serve as an attachment point also for yung mga muscles natin, yung mga ligaments doon sa neck and upper back region. Okay? So, um, aside from that one, as a role in muscle attachment, yung external occipital protuberance, it is usually involved in the head and neck movement also. So yung strength and flexibility ng mga muscles and ligaments nito, it usually impacts doon sa ability ng animal para ma-erase niya, ma-lower down niya, or ma-turn niya yung head niya. Okay? So usually we call that one as biomechanics, no? Biomechanics of the head and neck movement. So that is one function also of the EOP, or the external occipital protuberance. Okay, then we have here the lateral view of the skull. This is the lateral, and then we have the dorsal view showing yung paired na frontal bone. So ito naman yung mga frontal bones natin. So along with other na cranial bones, si frontal bone din also, that is one of the functions is to form yung protective structure, which is being known as the neurocranium. Okay, neurocranium. So ang pinaka-function niya nito is ini-encase niya and sinishield niya yung brain from any external traumas, no? So aside from that one, si frontal bone, ang pinaka one of the unique din sa kanya is attachment ng mga horns. So okay, so like for example, in some farm animals natin, particularly yung mga cattle natin and yung mga certain breeds ng sheep tsaka goat, yung frontal bone nila, it usually provide the bony base for the attachment ng horns. Okay? So ano ba yung horns? That is also, of course, that is for defense, or parang establishment the dominance within the herd, and sometimes of course for cooling the body through heat dissipation. Okay? So, yung dito naman, for the frontal bone, usually yung size, yung shape, yung configuration ng frontal bone ng mga animals natin, it could directly influence the size and shape of the horns also of the animals. Okay? So, aside from that one, attachment for horns, one also is for support mechanism for sensory organs natin. Like for example, yung orbit, it usually houses yung eyes, which is a part of the frontal bone. So yung adequate na protection ng eyes, that is very essential of course for maintaining the vision and avoiding the injuries that could impair an animal's ability na makapag-graze, okay, makapag-navigate, or makapag-detect ng mga threats. Okay? So another one, si frontal bone din, it usually contributes to the structure of the nasal cavity. So which is very important for the sense of smell. So pag intact yung nasal cavity, actually it helps yung mga animals natin na makapag-detect ng food sources. Okay? And even yung makapag-detect sila ng threat coming from their predators, no? Okay? So that is for the frontal bone. Okay, then we have here under the frontal bone, meron tayong tinatawag na ay zygomatic process of the frontal bone. So yung eto, yung zygomatic process of the frontal bone, it usually articulates with the zygomatic bone. Okay, I will show you later on yung zygomatic bone or what we call as the cheekbone. So, etong articulation na to, yung articulation na to, it usually forms the part of the zygomatic arch. Meron din later on doon sa zygomatic bone yung zygomatic arch. So that is usually a bony structure that extends laterally from the skull and contributes to the overall shape and stability of the skull. So, ano ba yung purpose ng zygomatic process? It usually provides yung structural support to the sides of the skull, particularly the region of the face. And more importantly, it maintains yung overall shape ng skull and it contributes doon sa strength and stability. And that is very important sa activities ng animals natin, specifically sa grazing. Okay? Sa grazing, sa chewing, doon, yung mga resistance for external forces natin. Okay, the next one we have the parietal bone. Ito naman, this is one of the paired bones that usually make up the sides and roof of the cranium. So one of the primary functions of the parietal bone, like any other cranial bones din, is to, of course, to protect the brain from external trauma. Yun naman yung pinaka-general when it comes to the skull. Kasi these is the whole na skull and these are just being divided into different cranial bones. So take note na lang that one of the main functions of these cranial bones is of course to protect the brain from any external trauma, no? So ganun din brain protection, structural support for any movement, for any activities natin. Ang pinaka-ano lang dito siguro for the parietal bone, this is for attachment for the temporalis muscle. Okay, temporalis muscle. So just attach it yung temporal, lagyan nyo lang ng IS. So temporalis muscle. So ano ba yung temporalis muscle? Ito yung isang muscle na to that is responsible for chewing. Okay, for chewing and jaw movements ng mga farm animals natin. So etong parietal bone na to, it usually serves as an attachment point for the temporalis muscle para makapag-allow to exert force on the jaw during the chewing process. Okay? So yun yung pinaka-main na ginagawa dito for the parietal bone. Okay, then meron tayong tinatawag ni external sagittal crest or simply the sagittal crest. Okay, so this is very prominent na ridge or crest that usually runs along the external surface of the parietal bones natin. So, ang pinaka primary function ng sagittal crest, this is for provision ng attachment site for powerful na jaw muscle. So, in animals that usually pag meron silang well-developed na sagittal crest, etong mga muscles na to usually involved doon sa, as what I've said, sa chewing, sa grinding, pag crash nila yung mga tough na plant material, pag super hard yung plant material, or kumbaga if they are predators not only for the farm animals but then for example for other animals that usually live in the wild. So yung mga wild animals natin, if they will crush yung mismong prey nila, one of the main na function, one of the main na tumutulong dito is this sagittal crest. Okay? And then we have the temporal bone. Ang temporal bone naman, it is aside from the protection, one of the key functions kasi ng temporal bone is to protect yung inner ear. Okay, so kung makikita nyo kasi dito na, malapit na dito yung ear. So yun yung pinaka-main na function din ni temporal bone. Protection of the inner ear, which usually contains yung mga structures that are critical for hearing and balance. Okay? So ano ba yung usually na dito for the inner ear? We have the cochlea, okay, that is Cochlea, and then the semicircular canals. Okay, so as what I've said, since that is for protection of the ears, in some farm animals natin, like for example, for the cattle and then the sheep, yung temporal bone, it usually contributes to the conduction of sound sa kanilang inner ears. So etong conduction of sound, it usually allows these animals to perceive low frequency sounds such as those that are being produced by the predators or other members of their herd, which is very essential for early warning. Okay, like for example, if they are being served as the prey, like for the lions, mga ganon, lalo na yung mga goats natin that are yung mga ibex that are being that usually live doon sa wild. So, ito yung isa sa pinaka-important na part din ng kanilang skull. We have the temporal bone for the conduction of the sound. However, aside from that one, in terms of, aside from that, the conduction of sound, yung temporal bone din ng mga farm animals natin, it usually supports the base of the horn. So yung structure ng temporal bone, aside from the frontal bone kanina, it usually influences the size and shape of the horn and its attachment doon sa kanilang skull. Okay? Then meron tayo dito anatomical structure that is under the temporal bone. We have the tympanic bulla. Okay? Yung tympanic bulla, that is a bony structure that usually encloses and protects yung middle ear na structures natin. Okay? So parang nagiging protective chamber siya para sa mga delicate components ng auditory system, including yung eardrum, or what we call, ang other term kasi ng eardrum, that is tympanic membrane. Okay, we have the eardrum, the ossicles, which are the small bones, and then the parts of the cochlea. Okay, so etong tympanic bulla na to, it usually helps na makapag-shield sa mga critical components from any external damages and contamination from the environment. Okay, so if from the first one kanina for the temporal bone, that is for the conduction of sound. Mainly for the tympanic bulla, it's usually for amplifying yung mga sound vibration. So as the sound waves enter the ear canal and it could reach the eardrum, they cause it to vibrate. So yun yung parang role ng tympanic bulla. So etong mga vibrations na to, they are being transmitted through the ossicles within the tympanic bulla, which now serve to amplify and transmit yung sound to the inner ear, where it is usually converted into electrical signals for the brain to interpret what were those sounds could be. Okay? So that is for amplification. Ina-amplify nila yung mga sound vibrations. And very important din si tympanic bulla in the sense na nire-regulate niya and ini-equalize niya, binabalance niya yung pressure within the middle ear, which is usually essential for normal hearing. Okay? So yung mga animals natin, including the farm animals, they need to adjust to changes doon sa air pressure, such as pag kumbaga during yung elevation changes, yung tympanic bulla, it will maintain yung stable na pressure level doon sa middle ear para ma-ensure that the eardrum can vibrate effectively. Okay? So those are the main importance ng tympanic bulla. Okay, then another one for the temporal bone, we have here the external acoustic meatus or the external auditory canal or yung ear canal natin. So, eto naman is usually it extends from the external ear. So, palabas na to, we have ang external ear that is usually the pinna or the auricle. Pinna, P-I-N-N-A. Letter P as in Papa. So, P-I-N-N-A or auricle, that is A-U-R-I-C-L-E, and then to the tympanic membrane or what we call as the eardrum. So ano yung function ni external acoustic meatus is to protect yung mga delicate na structures ng middle tsaka yung inner ear from any external elements. Like for example, for any dust, for any debris that could enter, no? Or any insects, yun yung pinaka-function din ni external acoustic meatus. Then, since it is a canal, so of course, that is seeing external acoustic meatus, it usually serves as a passageway for any sound waves to travel from the external environment into the middle ear until to the inner ear. Okay? So yung mga sound waves, they are being collected and then they are being channeled by the pinna and then they will enter the ear canal where they travel to the eardrum. And then we have the zygomatic process of the temporal bone of the farm animals natin. Ito naman is just a projection that usually extends forward and downward from the temporal bone. Okay, so it usually articulates with the zygomatic bone, which is very prominent sa mga cheekbone of the skull. Okay, so parang this is just the junction between the zygomatic process and the zygomatic bone that could form the zygomatic arch, no? And then last one, we have the temporal fossa. Si temporal fossa naman, located siya laterally, lateral aspect of the skull within sa temporal bone. So it usually bounded by the temporal lines which are ridges or crests on the temporal bone, and it extends from the forehead region. So forehead region, that is the frontal bone, until to the back of the skull, which is the occipital bone. So one of the primary functions of the temporal fossa, that is to provide an attachment site for the temporalis muscle also. Okay? So that's what I've said kanina, si temporalis muscle, that is one of the major muscles that are responsible for jaw movement, no? And then aside from that one, it usually plays doon sa biomechanics din ng jaw movement ng animals natin, yung temporal fossa. Okay, then we have here, para mas makita natin, kasi kung ganito lang, yung makikita natin for the ethmoid bone, hindi natin usually makikita. So kailangan it needs to be halved para before you can see the ethmoid bone. Okay? So one of the primary functions ng ethmoid bone is to form yung complex structure that usually divides the nasal cavity into left and right sides. Okay? So etong partitioning na to, yung partitioning na to could be essential for efficient na airflow para para merong ma-help, kumbaga ma-help niya na ma-direct yung inhaled na air through the nasal passages natin. So parang ina-assist kasi niya, parang ina-assist niya in the maintenance of the olfactory function, okay, which is the sense of the smell, which is very important sa mga farm animals natin in terms of foraging and detection of any threat. Okay? So aside from that one, si ethmoid bone din, since it is usually for the olfactory function. So one of the main functions din nito is for the attachment for the olfactory epithelium. Si olfactory epithelium, ano siya, nagko-contain siya ng mga specialized na sensory receptors that is usually responsible for detecting odors. Okay? So very important yung sense of smell ng mga farm animals natin. And then we have the sphenoid bone. Si sphenoid bone naman is a complex bone that usually situated at the base of the skull. So, central part din. So, ang ano naman yan dito, kung makikita ninyo dito, it's just usually at the base of the skull. So, one of the functions ng sphenoid bone is for tinutulungan niya na ma-support yung weight ng brain. Okay? Para merong stability din ng skull. Okay? Ang pinaka-kumpala dito for the sphenoid bone is yung meron siyang tinatawag natin na saddle shape depression which is called the sella tortica. Okay? Sella tortica. Sella, that is S-E-L-L-A. So sella. And then torsica, T-U-R-C-I-C-A. So ang tiobra namin dito, yung sella torsica is nandoon yung pituitary gland. Okay? Yung hypophysis. So nandoon yung pituitary gland. Ano ba the usual na function ni pituitary gland? Si pituitary gland, that is a vital endocrine organ that usually control yung mga various na hormonal functions ng katawan. Okay? Kasi later on sa endocrine system, we will tackle that one for the endocrine gland or the pituitary gland. Usually nandiyan yung anterior, yung posterior, yung intermediate na pituitary gland that secretes yung mga different hormones natin that could help or act as chemical mediator doon sa katawan ng animals natin. Okay? So that is just one part of the sphenoid bone, the sphenoid bone, and then the basi sphenoid bone, or also called as the basi-occipital bone. Okay, so that is for the cranial part. So we will now proceed to the facial part of the skull. So first one dito is the maxillary bone, or it is just usually called as the maxilla or maxillae. So ano naman yung ginagawa niya dito is for function ng face and then the head. Okay? So it forms yung upper jaw and it usually provides the structural support for many facial structures, like example including the upper teeth, yung mga nasal bones, yung parts ng eye sockets which are the orbits, yung mga ganun. So very important ito in maintaining the facial shape and integrity of the animal's facial part. So as what I've said, one of the functions of maxilla is support for the upper teeth or the maxillary teeth. So yung maxilla, it usually provides the necessary foundation for these upper teeth na to. Okay? So very important ito, most specifically sa mastication. Okay, very important to. Aside from that one, si maxilla din is nagko-contribute sa formation ng hard palate. Okay? Hard palate, ito yung bony structure na nagse-separate yung oral cavity from the nasal cavity. And then we have here under the maxilla yung infraorbital foramen. So that is just another anatomical structure which is the upper jawbone of the facial skeleton in farm animals natin. Okay? So, a small opening ito or hole that usually serves some functions, no? Ang pinaka-primary function nito is nag-a-act siya as a passageway, including yung mga nerves and blood vessels. Okay? Specifically, inaalaw niya yung mga infraorbital nerve and associated na blood vessels to exit the maxilla and supply sensation to various areas of the face. Okay? Ang nabatimaw ko ng infraorbital nerve, responsible isuda for the provision, it is sensory innervation to the face. Okay? Kailangan yun kasi para yung infraorbital nerve kasi it exits the skull through the infraorbital foramen, and then it will branch out into smaller nerves that usually supply sensation sa mga lower eyelids, sa upper lip ng animals natin, and then doon sa side ng nose. Okay? So ito yung mga nerves. These are usually cranial nerves, no? Na nagbibigay ng sensation sa face natin. And then we have the incisive bone, or what we call as the premaxilla or premaxillary bone. Ang pinaka-function naman ng incisive bone, that is for provision and support for the incisor teeth, which are located on the front of the mouth. Okay? So, but the purpose ng ito incisor teeth, they are usually adapted for cutting and shearing yung mga food. So they are used in the initial processing of food during feeding ng mga animals natin. Okay? So that is very essential, ito mga incisive bone, in terms of prehension, which is usually yung act of grasping and manipulating yung mga food items nila before ingestion. So ventrally, makikita din naman natin yung palatine bone naman. Okay? So that is for the incisive. Then we have the palatine bone. Crucial ito in the facial skeleton. Okay? Yung palatine bone, it is a key contributor sa formation ng palate. Okay? Which is the roof of the mouth. Okay? Yung roof ng mouth natin. So usually yung palate natin, it is usually divided into two parts. We have the hard palate, which is at the front, and then the soft palate, which is at the rear part of the animal's body. Okay? So yung hard palate, that is formed in part by the palatine bone. So it usually serves as a physical barrier that separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity. So etong separation na to, this is very crucial during breathing, during swallowing, and during pag merong during phonation or yung voice production natin, para ma-prevent yung food and liquids from entering the nasal passages natin. Okay? So aside from that one, it usually provides support din for the posterior teeth, yung mga molars doon sa upper jaw. So it usually help na ma-anchor etong mga teeth na to, and then it will maintain yung proper alignment for effective na chewing and grinding of food. So in farm animals natin, like yung mga cattle, yung sheep and goats natin, yung there are two actually. We have the major palatine foramen, and then we have the minor, etong mga to maliliit. We have the minor palatine foramen. Okay? So saan natin usually nakikita? It is closer to the midline of the hard palate. Okay? This is just similar also sa humans. Okay? So it is usually doon sa junction ng hard tsaka yung soft na palates natin. So ano ba the purpose na dagitoy? For the major palatine foramen, passageway is una for the greater palatine nerve and blood vessels. Okay? So etong nerve na to, it usually provides sensory innervation to the posterior part of the hard palate. Okay? And then doon sa mga surrounding tissues on the same side. In terms of the minor palatine foramen naman, That is just doon sa rear part, closer to the rear of the hard palate. So, ganun din, it usually serves as a passageway for the lesser na palatine nerves and blood vessels. Okay? So, yun naman yung ginagawa nila. That is just a passageway of the nerves and blood vessels, etong dalawa na to. And then we have the nasal bone or the nasal region or nasal skeleton natin. That is just basically for the provision of the structural support for the external nose. Okay, so it forms the rigid framework that gives the nose its shape and its strength. Okay, so protection din ng nasal passages. So nagpro-protect ito for the delicate na nasal passages which usually include the nasal cavity and yung mga respiratory airways natin. Then for the zygomatic bone or what we call as zygoma or cheekbone, another one ito, so paired bone din siya that usually forms the prominence of the cheek. So parang mabigyan ng shape yung face ng animals natin. So it usually articulates with other cranial bones including yung maxilla, yung temporal bone, and contribute to the formation of the zygomatic arch. Okay? So one of the functions din dito is for attachment for muscle. So yung zygomatic bone, it usually provides attachment points for several facial muscles including the masseter muscle. Okay, masseter, M-A-S-S-E-T-E-R muscle. So masseter muscle. And that is one of the primary muscles also. Aside from the temporalis muscle, we have also the masseter muscle, which is also one of the primary muscles responsible for jaw movement and chewing sa mga farm animals natin. Okay, meron tayong tinatawag na temporal process of the zygomatic bone. So ito lang naman, it's just an extension siya or projection of the zygomatic bone itself. So it is usually called as the zygomatic process. If you could recall doon sa mga unanan, meron ganito kanina sa temporal. We call that one as the zygomatic process. So etong process na to, it usually extends backward from the main body of the zygomatic bone and it usually articulates with the temporal bone. Okay? So etong articulation between the temporal process of the zygomatic bone and the temporal bone, this is usually called now as the zygomatico-temporal suture. Okay? Zygomatico-temporal suture. Suture that is S-U-T-U-R-E. Okay? So yung temporal process of the zygomatic bone, it usually contributes now to the formation of the zygomatic arch, which is the bony arch that spans laterally across the face from the zygomatic bone to the temporal bone. So ano ba the purpose ni zygomatic arch? That is usually for the provision of the support for the cheek, okay? And para ma-maintain yung shape ng face. So ganito yung zygomatic arch, okay? This is just a bony arch. So prominent feature ito of the facial skeleton and it is usually often referred as the cheekbone or the cheek arch. Okay? So as what I've said, ang role lang niya dito is for the facial appearance and facial symmetry sa mga farm animals natin. Okay, then we have the lacrimal bone, which is just a paired bone then. Okay, we have the lacrimal bone located on sa medial or inner part of the orbit or the eye socket near the nasal bone natin. Okay, so it ano ba the usual na contribution niya dito? Ang pinaka-contribution lang naman ni lacrimal bone is for the formation of the nasolacrimal duct system. Okay? So, yun yung ginagawa dito. And then, support for the eye. So, it usually contributes then for the overall support and the structure of the orbit. Then another one, we have the pterygoid bone. Paired bone din siya. Okay? Paired bone din siya located doon sa base of the skull. Okay? Then it's just for attachment din for several important muscles that are being involved sa jaw movement. Yung mga tinatawag natin na pterygoid muscles. Then another one, we have the vomer. So this is now the last one for the facial part. Vomer, singular suna. So kaya't nasa one unpaired bone located doon sa midline of the skull, doon sa nasal region. Okay? So very thin lang to, thin tsaka flat, and usually triangular in shape. So ang pinaka-function naman niya dito is para ma-provide yung structural support and separation between the two nasal passages natin and ma-maintain yung integrity ng nasal septum. Yung nasal septum that is very essential for proper na airflow through the nasal passages and then the olfactory function. And then we have the last one. So tapos na tayo sa facial. So lahat ng mga yon kasi na-discuss kanina is doon sa upper part. Then we have the last one. We have the mandible that is in the lower jawbone of the farm animals natin. So U shape is una that usually forms the lower part of the jaw. Okay? Actually, meron tayong tinatawag na vertical rami or vertical ramus. Pero I will not give that one na lang kasi medyo deeper na to. Okay, ano ba yung function ng mga mandibles natin? That is very basic naman, that is for chewing and mastication. Okay, they are very responsible for the movement ng lower teeth during chewing and mastication. Parang ang ginagawa ni mandible is makikipag-coordinate doon kay maxillary bone or the upper jaw para mag-grind and ma-break down yung mga food for digestion. Okay? Then aside from that one, it is also for phonation or the voice production. So the movement of the mandible in conjunction with the accessory organs in the mouth, we have the tongue, the lips, and other oral structures, they are essential now for the speech and vocalization ng mga farm animals natin. Okay? So that ends our discussion for the skull. So later on, I will just have it again for the another part of the discussion. So thank you for listening.